Good morning, everybody. It's February 12th. I'm Charlie Fink, and it's This Week in XR with Ted Schilowitz, Futurist at Paramount Pictures, and our guest this week, Eric Shamlin, SVP of Growth at Media Monks, which is a digital advisory / agency. Welcome, Eric, and thanks for joining us for the show.
Thanks for having me. Very honored to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you. So why don't we start? It's a slow news week, folks. I got to tell you up front, unfortunately, no one acquired anybody. There were some fundraising rounds by smaller companies and a few media announcements. The one I'm excited about is Arden's Wake is now available for the Rift. That's from Penrose Studios that did the award-winning short Alumet, which is free on Steam. So I saw it 2 years ago at Tribeca. It's great that they've finally been able to release it. I don't know what the delay was about, but this is a very substantial studio, and the director, Eugene Chung, has been described by many, including me, as the D.W. Griffith of virtual reality. So that's my one plug on content this week. But Eric, tell us about Media Monks and what it is the SVP of Growth is doing.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. And I do want to say I'm a big fan of Penrose. I think they've done some amazing work, and I'm very, very curious to see the final form of it.
Arden's Wake is quite good, and it's a natural step up from Alumet.
Yeah, I think Ted and I had a conversation around Alumet a couple of years ago. It was just, that for me is one of my all-time favorite pieces.
Beautiful.
But yeah, Media Monks, we're a digital agency. We sit at the intersection of content, data, and technology. We love to sort of combine creative and technology in very, very compelling ways. We're multinational, 40 offices, now 4,000 people globally. Been around about 20 years. Our core client set is, it's all the big guys. It's what you call the seven sisters, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google, Tencent, Alibaba. And so we're, deeply committed to being great partners to them in pretty much all efforts, but not exclusive to them. We just announced big partnerships with BMW, Mondelez.
Right. And a lot of these companies, to be fair, different divisions and different groups within the companies have different relationships with different vendors, right? So which groups are you typically working with inside of these giant companies?
With Google, it's Alphabet Direct, actually, so not technically Google anymore. And then it's their assistant group. So we work a lot with the digital assistant groups. We do a lot of voice work these days, and that's both for Amazon and digital and Google. And then a lot of it is in kind of their strategy and product development teams. So we're seen as kind of a leading UX consultant. So if they're going to launch a new product, they'll ship it to us. We'll workshop it. How are kids going to max out the credit card on Alexa, kind of thing. And so just kind of working with them on best practices, and then just adding that level of excellence in terms of user experience design. It's something we get sought after quite a lot.
I think it's really interesting, Eric. You mentioned that term, the Seven Sisters. That has a lot of meaning, interestingly enough, from a philosophical standpoint, as to how technology links with growth and duplication of services and goods, right? So like Charlie and I talked about this, and I actually was on a long 2-hour podcast yesterday where we really got into this about the law of seven, that these days when there's some sort of thing that can grow from this giant tree trunk of the public internet and data services and silicon, you almost instantly get 7 versions of it. You get, the FANG companies plus a few others all have so much duplication and overlap of services. They all have a messaging client. They all have a photo client. They all have a music client. They all have an e-commerce client. They all have et cetera, right? And it's such an interesting time as we debate, how innovation happens. And Charlie and I have had discussions about this, how innovation happens in various ways. And are we thwarting so much innovation because we just try and grow everything from the same tree these days? This tree that is so powerful that we can all branch off it so easily. Where is really the new, right? And it's an interesting thing to discuss.
Well, there's an argument to be made for the breakup of the tech companies. not just because of the issues around AI and social media. You could argue that, AT&T was heavily politicized. The breakup of AT&T in the 80s was heavily politicized. It was going to hurt the economy, blah, blah, blah. And the truth is, it was the beginning of a tech revolution.
Yeah, it spawned all kinds of innovation.
So many companies, Verizon, and it's hard to say, right? 40 years later, those companies are much better off. It created much more wealth, much more innovation. So you got to start to think that, maybe YouTube should be independent. Maybe it isn't right for it to be part of Google, and it has absolutely crushed Vimeo and Vivo and other services that would have emerged. And had any of those other services been successful, they would have immediately been acquired. So I do think that it's a poisoned competitive environment in that respect, and you do end up with these very powerful silos who want to have it their way. And so you end up with Microsoft having all the same features as Zoom and as Microsoft Office.
It oversimplifies it, but the only way for them to bring innovation is through acquisition now, right? So, and then they buy a new, smaller company that's got a little bit of buzz to them, and then they scale it dramatically, but then all the other seven sisters have to clone it, right? All right. We've got, to your point, a chat app. We've just bought an amazing chat app. Right. Well, now they all need chat apps. So.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for the FANG companies, Zoom's is much better. And it's much better for all the things that you can't see. We're on Zoom right now. If we were on Meet, if we were on Teams, the quality of this call would be much worse. Their noise cancellation, their throttling to even this out behind our images, unseen to people who use Zoom, is quite remarkable. And all you have to do is have a Google Meet conference to come to appreciate what Zoom has accomplished here.
Mm.
But at the same time, they're racing to add those features to Meet, right?
Well, they are, but this is kind of a Siri case, isn't it? I mean, Apple knows that Siri sucks eggs. It is the worst voice assistant. Anybody who's used Google Home or used Alexa, I used Alexa for 2 minutes, and I was like, why can't Siri be like Alexa? And so Apple hasn't put a bullet in Siri. Yeah, they're working behind the scenes, but it's taking them a long time. I mean, in the context of Apple going on and on and on, it's like being at Disney, what's a few years? Right. But still, at least, rounding the first turn, they're way behind on digital assistants.
Well, I think you make an interesting point, Charlie, that maybe at the end of a deep analysis, and there's lots of nuanced debate points about this in all ways, shape, and form, it takes
some academic go to research that.
Yeah, well, as you run, you do long educational things with your students. Both Eric and I have done many hour-long discussions about these things. It's very difficult to sort of debate all the pros and cons of this. But there's an interesting point that you made about maybe all of these very giant companies don't need to try and be good at everything, right? Maybe they can just find the three things that they're really good at and leave some others to find really good other pieces. It's a very interesting discussion, and I'm very much in the middle of when we talk about should these big companies be broken up in various ways, there's a really interesting argument about the fact that there is actually still real choice in the market. Now, there's an argument that, those choices are hidden and they're harder to find and you have to go out and get them. But it was interesting when, Tim Cook and Mark Zuckerberg got into a little bit of this very polite pissing match, right? And they have really, really smart lawyers on both sides that were finding these interesting arguments to make. And I thought a really interesting argument was that the fact that, Apple promotes and presents their messaging app as the app that you would use to do messaging, and we all use it, right? Well, you have to go through an extra layer to get to the Facebook Instant Messenger or WhatsApp or WeChat or something like that, right? They don't promote the other ones, and nor really should they, right? I mean, it's their competitive environment they own. It's a private company. They do what they want to do to help their shareholders and help their ecosystem. But it's a really interesting thing to kind of get into the nuances of what it means to be the most dominant player and actively prevent others from getting in while saying, well, no, it's all there. You just have to go find it, right? Like you were pointing about Vimeo and other competitors to YouTube. It's just
what do you think, Eric? Weigh in here.
Yeah, no. I was just thinking that's echoes of Netscape versus Explorer, right? It's like Explorer was built into the OS or the PCs, and Netflix or Netscape had a real problem with that and kind of went after them.
Right.
What a few landmark cases, as I recall. So it's going to be fun to see how that plays out. I think they're under so much pressure, these titans, to not let any part of the market go. You know, if a competitor suddenly runs an email application, all the shareholders are like, why don't we do that too? And so suddenly there's pressure to just keep duplicating services. And so I do, to your larger point, Ted, I do think there is kind of an abundance of choice right now. I think it simplifies the market to say there's only two titans. There's seven sisters. There's a lot of choice out there, and those are just the big ones. There's a whole, the telcos aren't even in those technically. Right.
And then you get something like Reddit that has become this really popular moment in culture for a certain layer of people that actually, willing to spend the time to use that as their client, to use that as their communication tool, right? And then you get TikTok, which kind of like evolves in some way, shape, and form. But obviously, funding wise, they get a lot of money from these giant tech companies. So it's just super interesting to think about it. It's a fascinating area to discuss.
So there is one news story that I think could provoke a good conversation here.
Yep.
A company named Fable Studio created a VR film with an AI character named Lucy at the center of it, called Wolves in the Wall. And it's won all sorts of awards. It was based on a Neil Gaiman story. And they have taken the AI, Lucy, who is your friend and sort of the heroine. You play an imaginary friend because you have to be someone in VR, right? So you play Lucy's imaginary friend, but she's AI and she kind of figures out from the choices you make, the kind of person you are. And you get that role in the adventure, which is not the same every time. So interesting stuff. So they pulled Lucy out now. And so Lucy is an independent, 10-year-old, artist who's attending Sundance, which was last week, not as a star, but as a filmmaker. And, she presented this little silly version of Dracula that looks like it would be made by a 10-year-old, and interacted with the audience and with other filmmakers. And in fact, Fable wants this to be the beginning of a new kind of role-playing game, where you make this friend with, it's not an imaginary friend, it's an AI that knows you. And so the next time you talk, it'll ask you questions about you. So it's in beta now, and they're developing other characters. They've got two female characters that they're getting ready to launch. One is a Parisian singer, and the other one is an American athlete. And again, these are so you can have a real imaginary friend. It is quite amazing that AI has developed, that quickly, because when you think about all the technologies that have to support this, it is quite an impressive achievement and a harbinger of things to come. Combine that with the announcement of, Epic having a browser-based avatar creation tool, which is, hyper realistic. Just suggests that the age of avatars and AI characters will soon be upon us, and we'll start seeing them everywhere, inside of games and when you call a customer care center.
Yeah, it makes me think of some of the work we're doing now. There's been a whole rush of digital influencers as well, completely artificial influencers, particularly out of Japan and Korea. And these are completely created digital humans that
Lil Michaela.
Yeah. And that has,
She's right. She's a social media star and she's got 5 million followers. That said, that is a one to many,
yep.
right? She's like a YouTuber. And in this, it's intimate. It's one to one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes me think it's an interesting kind of area to think about, because I actually hearken back to, I always try and find where was the like beginnings of the inspiration of that part of the branch of this big tree that we grow from, right? The big internet data silo silicon tree. And I actually think about the Tamagotchi. Remember the Tamagotchi?
Right. I thought of that immediately.
Is the Tamagotchi is kind of the origin story of Lucy, right? Is it's this
from the late 90s, it was that little keychain fob that had your character with you all the time.
Yeah, and you had to feed it.
Feed it, and you had to put it to bed and do all that stuff.
So Lucy is sort of the evolution of the Tamagotchi, and it's in it. And because I obviously work for a large entertainment media company, we're always sort of looking at what does it mean to build character relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do people identify with Dora or SpongeBob or Blue or and part of it is that belief structure that they are real, that they're not a created entity from a bunch of people sitting in a studio drawing stuff and working on computers. They've literally taken on reality, right? Similar to the way that, as kids, we all played with, dolls and G.I. Joe and, Kung Fu Grip and all this stuff. It becomes real in your head, right? So now the power of computers makes that reality dynamic much more powerful. And, then there's the two sides of the equation, much more dangerous also, and much more appealing, because you can connect to the algorithms of the human condition and start to make things believable in ways that we had to use this wonderful thing called our imaginations when we were little kids, right? We would go out in the backyard with characters and play things, right?
And it's funny, you hit on both the potential upside and the dark side. I want to try and keep it on the light side of it, but you can definitely see in the age of all the social media upheaval we've done over the last particularly couple of years, and how that data in this kind of use case could take it to a darker place. But I actually think there's with the pandemic, I think this kind of one-to-one intimate connection with an imaginary friend it's meaningful, it's powerful. And I can only imagine. I mean, obviously it's probably pretty simple now. I've not experienced Lucy one-on-one yet, but I'm very eager to. I think, but the potential here, I think, for sort of curing loneliness and curing isolation is huge.
Well, the core demographic is 15 to 25, and apparently that audience is really responding.
Yeah.
And then is it principally in headset you're interacting with her now?
No. Decidedly out of headset. You communicate with her on Zoom. She calls you on the phone. She sends you messages on WhatsApp and Messenger, and she kind of tries to insinuate herself into your life the way a friend would.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
So you get like random text messages. Hey, what's up?
Yeah, that's great.
Let's hang out.
So speaking of all that, Eric, I don't know how much time we have left or anything else on your agenda, Charlie, but I would love for Eric to mention some of the planet we used to live on a couple of years ago, and he and I would go on these amazing jaunts to China together and have incredible experiences in the world of this emerging media. I don't know if you wanted to just mention a little bit about our adventure.
Sure. This is a great way to wind things up. Great idea.
Yeah. So, I mean, Ted, I think we've all been in this space for a number of years, but a good friend of mine, Eddie Lowe, many of your listeners probably know him. He asked me to co-found an immersive festival in China called the Sandbox Immersive Festival. And it's probably one of my great life's honors. We held two festivals, 2018 and 2019, and then of course 2020 hit, and so we couldn't host it this past year. But Ted's been our keynote the first 2 years, and
awesome.
We like to joke that we call it summer camp because it kind of feels that way. It's in June, and it's kind of a who's who of VR, AR makers and creatives, and you get to spend a week in China, being sort of catered to, eating the best food, but just like really like wolves in the wall. We showcased, we showcased pretty much all the highlights out there. and it's just been a wonderful, wonderful time. And so hopefully this year I just talked to Eddie last night. We're trying to figure out a way to make it happen this year. And it's like many conferences.
Please God, don't do another Zoom conference.
Yeah, we're trying to.
Exactly.
Way
That's the
too
point
cool
about
for
this.
that.
Yeah, that's the conversation. Do we do it in VR chat or some other way? That's obviously distributed in digital.
You have to.
Yeah.
Because it's just first of all, after a day of doing this, Ted, do you feel like doing this more?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a certain sort of mental exhaustion. Eric and I talked about it because we talk a lot about what has gone on. Actually, it leads to an interesting sidebar. Last 2 days with PwC, which it has similar tenets to what Eric is doing in Media Month. It's a large consulting group. They work with all kinds of industries. They hosted a very large VR educational summit. They used a tool called Arthur VR, which is
I know Arthur.
Yeah, industrial sort of like tools and it worked pretty well. But I would say, other than me and maybe the folks that were like hosting the event, it was the first time many of these people had been in VR. They were like, CEOs of insurance companies and data companies and things that they have like real grown-up jobs, like serious grown-up jobs. And it was fascinating to listen to all the things that you and the three of us have discovered along the way, is this spatial connectivity of people in the real world, even if it's an artificial real world, is so much different than the 2D Brady Bunch effect.
Yeah.
And they were all commenting on how much they got out of it and how much they learned, because people did virtual presentations with a virtual stage and people were gathered
and
around.
I think the great thing about that Take Alt Space, for example, is that participants can be on a PC. Mm-hmm. And in the case of spatial, even on a smartphone. This way, VR is not exclusionary.
Right.
Yes, VR has certain qualities and some people might prefer it, but other people, don't have a headset, don't want to be bothered, are just going to get on their PC and follow along. And I think that's a trend that's going to continue. You have to meet people where they are. Some people will not tolerate the amount of friction created by putting on a device. Mm-hmm. And in enterprises, those people are legion. We're used to being in a world where people want to do that.
I think there's
but once you get into, I was working with a health system as one of my consulting clients. They were trying to figure out virtual collaboration, and the topic always becomes friction.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, it does. I think it's something that Ted and I discussed previously as well. I think there's also a bit of a generational aspect. As much as the three of us are at the bleeding edge of this, how often are you truly in headset? And
you know what I heard from senior executives? Well, my kids got a Quest and I tried it and I thought, you could use this for things other than games. And so they get curious and they start talking about it. So I think that's great. I mean, that curiosity is what's going to drive adoption and drive more people into headsets, that feeling that they're missing out, that they can't do what the other kids are doing. So that's the idea that we're bringing in people from PCs and showing them contrasting experiences is going to be great for VR. By the way, speaking of great for VR, Rec Room backed into a close to $3 million number based on their percentage of free downloads from the Oculus Quest store. Then they're looking particularly at Quest 2 downloads. Mm-hmm. And based on how quickly and how large the boost has been, I think they've grown several 100% since the fall. They're projecting 3 million headsets, which is what I was expecting to hear all along about their Christmas season. I was not buying that $1 million
number.
Because if that 1 million number is true, then they've spent about $100 per headset on marketing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, given that they're losing several $100 a headset already, it's hard to believe that they didn't ramp up, they didn't go bigger than that, especially after what happened with the Quest 1, where they sold out and weren't able to fill the demand that they created through tens of millions of dollars of advertising. So, I mean, what is fair? Anyway, so exciting for the industry. It looks like if they continue in the space that they will catch up to Sony by the end of the year, to PlayStation, which continues at 7 million headsets to be twice as big as Oculus, although their usage time is much lower.
Yeah.
So the people in the Quest spend more time in headset.
Yeah, I'll be so interested to see what Sony does launch next in tandem with the power of the PlayStation 5. I think, they are not going to let it go without a fight, and the fight is going to be important.
The CEO of Sony said they like VR and they see its potential, but he ain't rushing to build new hardware until there's more of a there. So I think that may be sort of trying to explain what's already happened, which is console owners giving a big yawn to VR, Sony VR. 7 million out of 140 million install base is not super impressive when you're in a world where the Nintendo Switch sells 12 million pieces of hardware the day it goes on sale.
Right, overnight, yeah.
The day it goes on sale. And by the way, it's the same price as the Oculus Quest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it wasn't, I think it still was brilliant of Sony to make it backwards compatible, though. You can plug in your PSVR to the PlayStation 5.
Yes, they have. So I don't think we'll see a headset from them for a year or two. The CEO suggested it would be later. They're not rushing it out. Hopefully they'll step up. It'll be more cross-platform. They have to give their users, they do now through the games like Rec Room, but they have to give their users a way to get to other app stores and to interact with, the millions of people who are, going to be colonizing different parts of the metaverse.
And the big thing for me is you have to get rid of the wire. Obviously the Oculus proved that the wire is the death call of the device and it will not survive and find.
Well, it's the wire and it's the gaming PC.
But the wire to me is the big one. The freedom that we have by using a Quest or other, fully wireless devices is so remarkable. And
it's true. Inside out tracking is absolutely a must have. If you're going to compete, you can't have external trackers and that's kind of why I like the Reverb. But I agree the wire on the Reverb is a problem.
Yeah, and I tend to think the Quest was arguably the public V1. I think
that's exactly right.
Like Rift and Vive of previous, those were prototypes effectively to the public. When it went wireless, that changed the whole game. Self-contained, 6DoF. So I always think of Quest as the proper sort of V1 from a public-facing standpoint. And you're gonna still need probably V5 before it goes like mainstream, right? Yes. I think we're still early days, but the self-contained all-in-one wireless, that was the game changer to Ted's point.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
So I think that's our show this week. We had lots to talk about as always. Eric, thank you. It's been great having you. You'll have to come back and hang out with us again.
I would love to anytime. This is fun.
All right. Much love to all of you who are listening, and to you, my friend. I will see you next Friday.
Thanks, Charlie. See you next week.
Thanks, Ted.
We're out.